Daniel Westwood was a name whispered in boardrooms, printed on magazine covers, and mentioned in every top business podcast. CEO of Westwood Innovations, he had built a tech empire from scratch, starting in a garage and climbing his way to a 75th-floor office overlooking the heart of the city. His suits were always crisp, his watch cost more than most people's cars, and his calendar was so packed that even a 5-minute walk outside was considered a break. But no one knew what Daniel looked like when the lights dimmed, when the office emptied, and he was alone. No one saw the man staring out the glass wall of his penthouse, wondering when success had replaced his smile. He had no family left. His parents had passed in a car accident when he was 23, just as his startup was taking off. He buried his grief in work. Relationships came and went, none lasting longer than a few dates. He told himself love was a distraction. But late at night, Daniel's chest would ache, not from stress or fatigue, but something else. A hollowness he couldn't define. One gray Thursday afternoon, he canceled a meeting and told his driver to drop him a few blocks from the office. "I'll walk," he said, ignoring the rain falling in lazy sheets. Umbrella-less, coatless, he wandered the streets like a ghost. People passed him by without recognizing the billionaire in sneakers and a hoodie. He wasn't even sure where he was going, until a small voice stopped him. "Mister." It was so gentle he barely heard it. He turned. Standing beside a lamppost, holding a broken pink umbrella, was a little girl no older than 6. She wore mismatched boots and a faded blue dress. Her cheeks were rosy from the wind, and her hair was tied in pigtails, slightly uneven. She looked at him with big brown eyes, tilting her head. "You look sad," she said softly, not asking, just stating what she saw. "Wanna meet my mommy?" For a second, Daniel froze. No one had spoken to him like that in years, without agenda, without reverence, just human. What?" he asked, caught off guard. She smiled. "My mommy's nice. She always knows what to do when I'm sad." Before he could protest, she grabbed his hand, tiny fingers wrapping around his cold, ringless ones, and led him down the block. She introduced herself as Lucy. "I like jellybeans and coloring." "Do you?" Daniel didn't know what to say. No one had asked his favorite color in 2 decades. She pointed to a small bakery tucked between a laundromat and a thrift store. "We live above that. Mommy works inside. Come on." Inside the bakery, the smell of cinnamon and fresh bread wrapped around him like a warm blanket. It was the kind of place you'd expect in a small town, not downtown. Behind the counter, a woman turned around, and for a moment, Daniel forgot to breathe. She was in her early 30s, flour on her apron and a streak of jam on her cheek. Her eyes, those same warm brown eyes, widened when she saw him, then softened as she looked at Lucy. "Sweetie, who's your friend?" she asked gently. Lucy giggled. "He's sad. I told him you could help." The woman looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and then did something no one else ever had. She walked around the counter, took his hand, and said, "Let's sit. You look like you haven't rested in years." They sat in a corner booth. She poured him tea without asking, gave Lucy a chocolate croissant, and then waited. No small talk, no prying, just presence. After a few minutes, Daniel spoke. Not about his business, not about his billions, but about his parents, about the night he got the call, about building an empire to distract himself from the fact that he never got to say goodbye. The woman, her name was Claire, listened without interruption. And for the first time since he was 23, Daniel cried, not politely, not with a handkerchief, deep, guttural sobs. And Claire didn't flinch. She didn't offer platitudes. She just placed her hand on his and let him be human. Lucy leaned into him, resting her head on his arm. "You feel better now?" she whispered. Daniel nodded. "A little." Claire smiled. "Sometimes, people just need a place to land." From that day on, Daniel came by the bakery more often. At first, he told himself it was just for the coffee. Then for the scones. But deep down, he knew it was for the way Lucy beamed when she saw him. For the way Claire would slide him a cup of tea and ask, "Rough day?" Like it was normal. For the way his heart didn't feel quite so heavy when he walked back to his glass tower afterward. One day, he brought Lucy a storybook, and she squealed with joy. "Read it to me, Mr. Daniel." And he did, on a bench outside the bakery, as rain tapped gently on the awning. Weeks passed, then months. The media started to notice that Daniel Westwood was smiling more. Laughing, even. Rumors swirled. Was he dating someone, starting a family? But Daniel didn't answer. This was his sacred space. One afternoon, he offered Claire a business proposal: help him expand the bakery, open franchises, go national. She refused. "I'm not doing this for the money," she said. "I do this because it keeps us connected to people." 2 moments. You can't franchise that. Daniel had never been refused before. And yet, he wasn't angry. He was inspired. He realized for the first time that maybe he had been doing it all wrong. Maybe happiness wasn't in the skyscraper, but in the bakery below. In the small kindnesses. In the little hands that reached out to his when he least expected it. Lucy gave him a drawing one day. A stick figure man with a big smile, holding hands with a little girl and her mom. "That's you now," she said proudly. He stared at it for a long time. And when she asked if he wanted to come to her school's Daddy-Daughter Day, he didn't even hesitate. "Of course," he said, his voice shaking. That night, as he lay in bed, Daniel looked at the drawing again, and for the first time since he was a young boy, he whispered, "Thank you." But the biggest surprise, the one he never saw coming, was still ahead. Because one rainy morning, a letter arrived at the bakery, addressed to Claire, and what was written inside would force Daniel to choose between the life he had built and the life he never dared dream of. The bakery was quiet that morning, except for the hum of the oven and the gentle thump of Lucy's footsteps dancing near the window, pretending to chase raindrops. Daniel had just arrived, holding a bouquet of fresh tulips for Claire. He had no idea that a single envelope waiting on the counter would flip his world upside down. Claire looked pale as she held it in her flour-dusted hands, eyes frozen on the handwriting. She hadn't opened it yet. "Is everything okay?" Daniel asked, gently brushing her shoulder. She hesitated before answering, her voice barely a whisper. "It's from Lucy's father." Time froze in Daniel's chest. He hadn't dared ask much about Lucy's dad, assuming he was just gone or perhaps never involved. Claire had always avoided the subject, and he'd respected that boundary. But now, this letter, this sudden contact, felt like a shadow stretching into the warm little world they had built together. She opened it slowly. Her eyes skimmed the words while Daniel held his breath. A tear slid down her cheek as she finished reading, and she handed it to him without a word. The words on the paper were clear and cruel. "Claire, I know I left you and Lucy. I wasn't ready, but now I want to meet my daughter. I want custody. My lawyer will contact you soon." Daniel's fists clenched. That man, who had walked away when Claire was pregnant, who had left her to raise a child alone, working endless hours baking bread just to keep a roof over their heads, now wanted custody. As if Lucy was a possession he could just reclaim. Claire sat down, trembling. "He has money now," she whispered. "And he's angry I never told him where we lived. I did what I had to. I protected Lucy, but if he really tries to take her," her voice broke. Daniel knelt beside her. "You're not alone, Claire. Not anymore." But deep inside, fear rippled through him. Legally, Claire had very little support. The father had rights, and without a strong case or representation, it was possible she could lose Lucy. "We'll fight this," Daniel said firmly. "I'll get you the best legal team money can buy." Claire shook her head. "He'll say I used you, that I got close to you for your money. You're the most powerful man in the city. This could get ugly." Daniel's heart ached. "Claire, I don't care how ugly it gets. I'm not walking away." Over the next few days, Daniel put everything on pause, his business, meetings, even a multi-million-dollar merger. His board was shocked, but for the first time, he didn't care. Lucy came first. Claire came first. He was all in. His legal team reviewed the situation, and the more they dug, the clearer it became. Lucy's biological father had a history: arrests, debts, abandonment cases. But still, with money and power on his side now, he was ready to put on a perfect face in court. One evening, after Lucy had gone to sleep and Claire sat staring at the silent oven, Daniel touched her hand and said, "Marry me." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Daniel, this isn't the time. You don't have to fix this by." "I'm not trying to fix anything," he interrupted gently. "I love you, Claire. I love Lucy, and I want to be her father, not just in court, but in life. In every messy, beautiful, bedtime story kind of way." Tears filled her eyes. "This isn't a fairy tale, Daniel." He smiled. "Then let's write one anyway." She didn't say yes that night. But she didn't say no either. A few days later, the custody battle began. The courtroom was cold and formal, full of people in suits pretending to know what was best for a little girl they had never met. Lucy's father stood tall, smug, well-dressed, pretending to be reformed. He made claims that Claire was unstable, that she kept his daughter from him out of spite. Then, Daniel was called to testify. The room quieted as he walked to the stand. The billionaire CEO, the man who could buy buildings and bend markets, yet his voice cracked when he spoke about a little girl who handed him jellybeans and drew him pictures with crayons. I was a man who had everything, he said, looking directly at the judge. But I was empty. Then Lucy walked into my life. She didn't care about my money. She only cared that I was sad. And she showed me something no business ever could. What it means to be seen, to be needed. I don't want to replace her father. But I will fight every day to be the man she can count on. Because Lucy isn't a trophy. She's a miracle. The room was silent. Even the opposing lawyer paused. Claire took his hand, and in that moment, the judge saw the truth, not just in documents, but in their faces, in the trembling voices, in the stories. A week later, the judgment came. Sole custody remained with Claire. Lucy's biological father was denied visitation based on his past and his sudden, self-serving appearance. Outside the court, Daniel dropped to one knee. This time, Claire said yes. Their wedding was small. Just a few friends, some neighbors, Lucy spinning in a white dress, laughing as she threw flower petals into the air. And when the officiant said, "Do you take this woman and this child as your family?" Daniel said yes with tears in his eyes. Their life wasn't perfect. The bakery still had early mornings, and Lucy still refused to eat broccoli. But every night, they read stories together. And every morning, Daniel woke up to the smell of cinnamon rolls and the sound of Lucy's laughter echoing through their home. One day, while Daniel walked Lucy to school, she looked up at him and asked, "You're not sad anymore, are you?" He smiled. Not even a little. She squeezed his hand. "Told you mommy could help." That evening, Daniel sat at his old office desk, now barely used. He opened his journal and wrote, "The day a little girl saw through my silence was the day I started living again." He looked out at the city skyline and whispered, "Thank you, Lucy." Then he closed the journal and walked back to the bakery, where his real life, his best life, was waiting. And as the sign on the door now read in golden script, "Home is where the heart rises."